Hello and welcome to another episode of Art Discourse. Today I am privileged to have this beautiful guest here, Miss Anne Ciccolella. Did I get that right?
Ciccolella.
Ciccolella.
Yeah, good.
Anne is the director of the Austin Shakespeare Theatre Company, and she's here today to speak to us about theatre, plays, this amazing word, this ancient form of art that many of us from the modern world, people like me who were born in the 21st century, know very little about. So why don't we just go right in and ask you, what is a play?
Well, I mean, it relies on people who are alive on stage. So if you have a projection of people, that's not a play, right? That's a movie or something else, a hologram maybe. But it has to have some other qualities too. It can't just be people talking about anything, right?
Right.
It needs to have the essence of conflict. And the best is when a play has inner conflict within the actors, but also has conflict between the characters. And if it has both of those things, then it really is very, very powerful. And it goes through that, a story would go through how the conflict develops, and then does the conflict resolve? And the resolution of the conflict is the climax usually, or the ending of the play.
I see. So you're saying the central thing is the conflict. Without the conflict, there cannot be a play, or are there ways to work around that?
It's a little bit like abstract painting. You know, if you think of abstract painting as illustrating something you can recognize in reality, then, yes, there are many plays that have people just chit-chatting, they're talking, and it goes around all different topics, and, maybe it's just idle. Well, that's not structured as a story that you're telling, right? So it is dialogue, but it has to have a form to it, I think, to be considered a play. Otherwise, it's just dialogue.
Otherwise, it's boring also, I would say. You're not...
I'm curious, though, Yonatan. Tell me about you and theater. Have you seen any plays? What kind of plays have you seen?
I think in high school, for example, we were forced to read a few plays.
Okay.
The first one was Antigone. Obviously, I think almost everyone were forced to interact with it at a certain point, and I really liked it. I remember I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the pathos of the Greek theater, the drama, the sense of there's something big happening. There's this dramatic, will I die or will I bury my brother, or asking these moral questions, moral issues. Another one I think should be known to Americans is a play called All My Sons. Are you familiar with that one?
Of course. Now, when you say you were forced to read them, I want to dig in on that a little bit.
Yeah.
So have you seen plays performed live in front of you, or just read them, or tell me about that?
So I've seen in terms of seeing live ones, I've seen a few Israeli ones, which I went with my mother when I was a teenager. But they were all comedies. They were not serious like drama. The only time I've seen a serious drama was Antigone in Ayn Rand in Athens. Actually, they performed scenes from Antigone.
Wonderful.
And it was great.
That's
because
a privilege.
I recognized the scenes, so it was really great. Yeah. You missed that one.
Good. Right, I didn't see that when I wasn't in Athens. I guess I want to say something about reading a play versus seeing a play. And my analogy is often when you think of a map and the real place that you're traveling. So when you're looking at a map, the old days, you'd look at a piece of paper with some red lines on it and so on. Now you look at Google Maps or you look at Waze, but what you're looking at is the framework of the real thing. So if you think of reading a play, it's like reading the score of music.
It's like reading,
you're not listening to the music.
You don't get anything out of reading the score.
Well, if you know how to read music, you might be able to hum it, right? but you're not hearing the piano, you're not hearing the music. And that's why I really think seeing a play is a different experience than reading a play. Now, reading a play is better than nothing, right? If all you had was seeing the comedies that you saw in Israel and you never could read, you never were allowed to read Antigone, that would be a terrible waste. Yeah. Do you see what I mean about reading a play versus
absolutely,
experiencing it?
I did also, I saw the like recordings of plays, like of like one of Antigone, I remember, and also of All My Sons. I saw recordings, I guess also to ease my learning, but I did also read them. But I also saw the
film. And I think seeing a recording, especially if it's a recording of a good production, is very, very helpful.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And I have some suggestions for you and your viewers today about movies they might want to see with the idea this really is a play. So, you know, movies have a lot of scenery, a lot of action, and plays are more dialogue, people just speaking and not necessarily punching each other or flying in the sky as a movie might be. But I do, part of my attraction to plays from the very beginning was plays about ideas.
Mm-hmm. About ideas in the same way as philosophy or more?
Yes. So if there's a area called a theater of ideas. Mm-hmm. So I saw Tom Stoppard's play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. And there's a lot of absurdist and comedy in it and so on, but there are a lot of ideas in it. And that made me want to go and be involved in theater. Because the ideas and the drama and the color and the lights and the whole thing, I thought, I want to live in this world. I don't know how, but this is I want this to be my field. And I saw it when I was, I guess, 17.
Oh, wow.
So that's a great age, you know, to be what we call bit by the bug, infected.
So when you were 17, you decided that you want to be in theater?
Yeah. I had already done some directing from the time I was 15, but it was, you know, more high school stuff and so on. But I went by myself to a Broadway show to see this play, and sitting there, it was like, wow. And I wasn't sure how. I didn't know if I'd be a light designer or if I'd be a critic. It took me years to get to, okay, really, I think I want to direct.
Yeah, and also from I also forgot to mention, I also saw La Mise, the musical in London.
Oh,
which completely blew me away.
Good. Well, I know at the end we're going to talk about the Sublime.
Yeah.
And I think especially in musicals, because the music heightens the emotion immediately, right? A play, I might be working for an hour to get you involved, get the setup. A musical just takes you very, very quickly. And I know Ayn Rand loved the song "The Impossible Dream," even though the story, if you will, of Don Quixote has a negative quality. The Impossible Dream, the song, has that elevating quality. So we'll talk more about that later, though.
Yeah. So you yourself, you are directing plays, right? So,
and what's great is because I have the top job, I get to pick them. So I have a board of directors that has to say, yes, you can do this, we can afford this, we think there would be an audience for it. But I get to pick the plays that I want to do, and that's a great gift. You know, normally a director's out there looking for work, and they'll take whatever's given to them. But over the years, I've gotten to do this, and that's been great.
That's fantastic. So I assume you mostly do Shakespeare due to the name of
the...
the...
So Austin Shakespeare, every year we do at least one Shakespeare play. But when I took the job 15 years ago, they had just done the Glass Menagerie, Tennessee Williams. And I thought, well, if they've done the Glass Menagerie, there are many plays that we could do that focus on poetry or focus on ideas. So we do more than, Mark Pellegrino is going to come and do a staged reading of Ibsen's An Enemy of the People in December here in Austin.
That'll be fantastic. We can put the link in the description.
Oh, good, yeah. he said, I love this play. I would love to come and do it. I said, well, we probably can't afford to have you to come for 2 months because that's a month of rehearsals and a month of performance. But why don't you come for a week and we'll stage it, but you can read the script and it really will be exciting. So that's going to happen.
I'm sure it'll be fantastic. Yeah. I'm sure it'll be amazing. So maybe you can also talk to us a bit about the difference between the creative process of a theater comparing like maybe a movie or some other art forms, because it's so alive, right? The play is such an alive thing. You can't go back and edit. Right.
I think it's thought these days that the film is the director's medium, because the director is forcing your eye to look at a ring on somebody's finger. Well, if you see a whole play, a whole stage, you have to choose. Am I going to look at his head? Am I going to look at his hand with the sword in it and so on? But the screenwriter is writing the story, right? But the director decides what is left on the cutting room floor. You know that expression? The director and the editor, the film editor, decides what you will see. So plays are really an author, a playwright's medium. And the playwright, you know, that word is spelled W-R-I-G-H-T. It's not playwright, W-R-I-T-E, but W-R-I-G-H-T is like wheelwright. It means the maker of the play. So he's going to say, here's what happens on stage. So the author has a lot of control. And of course, casting is part of what a director does in both areas. And casting, you know, they say casting is 90% of directing. So if you cast the wrong people, you're going to be in big trouble.
So when you have a play, you are also partaking in all that process, right? So
yes.
the writer, do you do also independent plays?
We don't do many new plays, but we do adaptations. So for instance, we're taking Corneille's El Cid and translating it from French into English. And we're putting actually some Spanish language in it as well, 10% Spanish. So sometimes we do adaptations, but we don't do original plays, no.
I see. So I would assume, so you as a director, you have a hand in all of that process, right? You work alongside others. So in that sense, it is similar to a movie, right? A director in a movie also, he works with a whole crew of people. And you have the actors. So in the rehearsals, for example, maybe you can give us a bit from that experience. I'm sure it's fascinating. What do you do in a rehearsal as a director?
Well, you know, in a movie, oftentimes there is no rehearsal. Oftentimes in a movie, you might shoot the same scene 10, 20, 30, 40 times. And in a sense, that's the rehearsal. That's the, you know, this version, that version, and so on. But in a play, we'll rehearse for a month. So we'll have 100 hours of discussing what's happening, looking at the physical relationships, deciding how people move through space, how they hold their bodies, what their voices are going to do. And, you know, there's also designers, right? Costume designer, set designer, light designer. Those are very important roles in the experience of the audience. But that casting is the first step. And that's very important. So in Austin, a lot of people actually come to Austin who want to act because there's a lot of theater in Austin. So if you got out of graduate school and you wanted to develop your resume, Austin's a good place to come. After that, people will go to Chicago or LA or New York, but they'll have a little bit more on their resumes. So I usually have about half the actors, people I know from the past, and half of the actors are new to me. For the El Cid, we're going to have somebody who's just came from Rome. We're going to have lots of different people.
That's cool. And so it's nice that you give this stage for these younger aspiring actors. That's must be an interesting experience to work with these people. So
well, there's a lot of competition because, you know, you'll have people who say, oh, I'd like to do this. I did it in high school. And it's like, okay, there's 80 people we will audition. Can you beat out,
oh, wow.
you know, for 10 roles, let's say, can you beat out the other 8? So it's not just, oh, I'm aspiring. You have to have some skills. And we have some union actors So in terms of how they speak and how they move and so on.
So let's talk a bit about the experience of a play. It's also, as we alluded to previously, in terms of experience, it's very different. You can look to different places in a movie. Your eyes are directed to the same place as the director wants. What can we say about the difference in terms of experience?
Well, when the relationship between the audience and the actor, no matter what the audience does in a movie, they may gasp, they may laugh, they may applaud in a movie. You've been in movies where there's lots of reaction in the audience, but the screen is going to show the actor doing the exact same thing, whether the audience is bored or whether they're excited and so on. In a play, there's a circuit of energy. So there's energy from the audience who is oftentimes imagining some of the scenery. The play might have very little scenery, but the audience is imagining some of it. And the actors may be like a sports game. The actors may be more involved or more energized if the audience is more involved. So like if you see a music concert and the audience is on the edge of their seat, that may impact the musicians that particular night. So that's an exciting aspect to it. And it is, in many ways, the play is happening in your imagination. It's not just on stage, it's in you. And when you're seeing a movie, it's much more, you're seeing exactly the reality that the director wanted you to see.
And every stage is different, right? Because they might replace the lead actor, or they might I don't know, they might miss a line. Although I'm sure it doesn't happen when you are the director.
No, of course it will. Of course it will.
So it's different every time, whereas in a movie it'll always be the same.
Yes.
So also when I'm thinking of different genres, like a comedy is very important, the reaction of the audience, right? It's important that they will laugh. Otherwise, you didn't do a good job, right?
Right.
So maybe we can talk a bit about some of the different genres and how they relate in a different way to conflict. So what is an example of a conflict in a comedy, for example?
Well, oftentimes there's a misunderstanding, right?
Okay.
So comedy from the Greeks to now, mistaken identity, for instance, is very common in Shakespeare. So you think somebody's somebody else, you're talking to them like they're somebody else, and they don't know what you're talking about. Or if there's a romance, somebody comes and kisses you because they don't recognize you're the twin of the brother. So I think comedy relies on the script. It is true that sometimes comedy relies on a personality,
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a good script, you can really ride on that comedy. Tragedy similarly, and tragedy really is a Greek invention, right? Catharsis is, Aristotle identified that in the best Greek tragedies, there was a release of emotion. That's what catharsis means, right? So great plays like Antigone you mentioned have a release of emotion in the audience, even though the ending might be very sad. There's a resolution and so on. Now we have more of, comedy and drama. So you may have, even in an Ayn Rand play, I don't know if you know the Ayn Rand play called Think Twice. There's lines in there that are very funny when you do them. Even actually Night of January 16th, which is a script that more people know. Line for line, there's a lot of sort of sarcasm, and the heroes will be a little cynical against the villains and so on. So you'll have a laugh line. But contemporary plays have more of a mix of comedy and drama,
mm-hmm.
whereas ancient plays are more, this is a comedy throughout, this is a tragedy throughout.
And the musical?
A musical depends. There used to be a thing in America in the early part of the 20th century called musical comedy, right? So that's the earlier, the first half of the 20th century, probably till about 1950. That was what a musical was, right? It was a musical comedy. So it was Damn Yankees, okay, or Guys and Dolls. But when you said Les Mis, There's some funny moments in Les Mis, but it is not a musical comedy. It is based on the Victor Hugo story, and it's quite emotionally serious. And you cry. It has a very unhappy conclusion, if you will.
It's very powerful, the La Mise. I still remember, and I'm still sorry about the seat that I picked, because I picked the cheapest seat I could find, and I couldn't see half of the screen. So but I will go back there. I'm not too worried about that. I'll go back to London to see that again. And it takes me back to, I think, earlier years where I was more cynical, and my approach towards a musical would be musical and people singing, and why would I want to go to a musical? It's not. It's silly. What do you think about that approach?
As a young person in my late teens and early 20s, I felt the same way. Because remember, I wanted meat, I wanted ideas, I wanted intellectual stimulation, and I felt like musicals. So my friend in college said, you must go see the work of Stephen Sondheim. So as a young man, he wrote the lyrics to West Side Story, and the play I saw was called A Little Night Music. And it was a play. It had music, it had songs, but it really was a play with comedy and drama and all that. And that's how I really fell in love with the musicals of Stephen Sondheim. And I've done many, staged many of his shows. We have a jazz club in Austin, and we're going to do songs from West Side Story. So not the play. And of course, West Side Story has a lot of dancing, not the dancing, but the songs are so dramatic, as Maria and Tonight and all that music. So it just depends on the piece. Now, when we're talking about 21st century musicals, they're going to be much more based on rock or based on more contemporary music that I might not be as in love with as I am with more Sondheim and more melodic pieces.
So it is quite similar to opera, isn't it? And I'm thinking, like there was a great Ocon lecture about Wagner. I don't know if you watched that one, but it makes me think a lot about the difference, the similarity between a play and an opera.
I will say the one thing I wanted to bring up today about play reading, because I don't want to discourage people from reading a play. I mean, if the only way you were going to experience Antigone, you'd have to wait for somebody to produce it. That's unlikely. But if you could sit down and read the book, you could do that any night. And those Greek plays are like one act. So you could read Antigone in less than an hour. When I first was introduced to opera and I studied it, I would sit down with the recording and the libretto. So on one side of the libretto, you'd have the Italian or the French or the German, and then you'd have the English. Well, that's something you could do with a Shakespeare play. If you wanted to watch a Shakespeare movie, Ian McKellen as Macbeth or something, then, they might not say every word of the script, but I think it's perfectly fine to sit down with the script as the movie is going on if you want to learn more about Shakespeare, for instance. And of course, there are, plays that I like Much Ado About Nothing with Kenneth Branagh. I wanted to bring that up today. And also Romeo and Juliet with the Zeffirelli version. There's a contemporary version, with guns and all that. But I of course, like the more romantic version.
They tend to butcher it with the modern version, don't they? I had a friend who went to an Antigone, and it was was a disaster. It was all abstract and ripped away all the beauty of the. It's a beautiful thing to go back to ancient Greece. Why don't you just go back to ancient Greece? It's much more interesting, I think. That's what they did, by the way, at the Athens performance. So maybe we should talk a bit about the Sublime.
Sure.
So the Sublime were in the world of painting, where I spend most of my time when I do my intellectual studies. The Sublime in the 19th century is a big deal. Like the painting behind me, of course, The Wonder Above the Sea of Fog. It's important, but it was related to the idea that we need to go back to nature, and we need to be one with God, and nature is so great, and but they all took it to the I would say the bad perspective, to the religious perspective. So maybe it's two questions. First is there a sublime in a play, and the second one is the sublime a good thing? Is it a positive idea in art, or is it just a negative, perhaps a result of Rousseau and thinkers like that? What would you say about that?
Well, I love to talk about it, and I want to learn more about it and think more about it as you do, Yonatan. So most of the writing and thinking about the sublime is in visual art. Mm-hmm. So The Wanderer, which is over your shoulder there, has that sort of mysterious, it does focus on a man, but he is in a big world. And somehow his spirit is elevated. And oftentimes the sublime is associated with almost terrifying life and death. So is this a storm, or is it icy? What's going on there? I sent you a letter from Ayn Rand that Ayn Rand wrote in her letters to an actor. And it was an actor she saw in a play who was playing a hero. And she said that for her, the sublime was a man, was a person, a human being, and that he exemplified this hero so perfectly that she wanted to compliment him and thank him for this. And in a way, if you think of her heroes, there are moments in those novels and plays where there is a moment of the sublime. Now, I do associate it with religion because it does have a spiritual quality. It's physical, but it rises above the physical to the soul, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I associate it with Cyrano de Bergerac. When I think of him in the balcony scene, and Christian, who he's got saying his words, is kind of muddling through it, and Cyrano says, "No, you hide. I'm going to speak my words." That moment for me is sublime, and in a way that when I said the Impossible Dream song, there's an elevation there that has a sublime quality as a hero. So I'd like to think about that, write more about that. I actually wrote an email in preparation for our meeting today to Ben Baer and to Greg Salieri, because I know that they've done some thinking about the sublime, and I would love if objectivists would dig deeper into that and talk more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And last week I was in Austria, and we were in a beautiful place, absolutely gorgeous. It was a lake, and the lake was surrounded by mountains and a forest. So you can see the tall mountains reflecting on the water. It was absolutely gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And I felt that sense of, wow, this is grand, this is amazing, this is
spirit lifts.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think the sheer beauty is a big factor in that feeling. But I was also looking around, and I saw higher than the mountains, I saw plains. And you see actually a lot of planes passing. So, people say go to nature and see that God is bigger than you, that you feel small. But I was feeling big because, who built these planes? And they are way taller than these mountains. So that was also sublime, these planes. Or when you go around New York City, of course, great man-made places like that. So that's also sublime, right?
Yes. And, looking at The Wanderer behind you and thinking about this, I'm also reminded Ayn Rand in her youth enjoyed mountain climbing.
Really?
Yes. There's a photograph of her mountain climbing.
Interesting.
And I think that experience of rising and then looking out is exactly what you're talking about, Yonatan, right? It's that your spirit rises.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's I did not know that. It's interesting
Yeah.
fact
Yeah.
for our viewers
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So maybe we should talk about the 9th of January 16th.
Sure.
Why should we read this play?
Well, I honestly think it is very entertaining. The thing that's weird about reading it is she has a gimmick in it. You know what a gimmick is?
Mm-hmm.
It's some clever trick, right? And the gimmick is that they pick out of the audience 12 people to be the jury. So when you're reading it in a way, you are the jury. It was very successful. You know, it was successful before The Fountainhead was successful. It was on Broadway. And they would pick sometimes celebrity juries. And one of the juries was Helen Keller. Do you know who that is?
Yeah.
She's the blind and deaf.
The
and
educator.
she was a genius.
Yeah.
Yes. And she, was an amazing person. But she was par excellence an altruist. So when she saw the play and she came to the end of it, oh, absolutely guilty. So it's a very interesting play. It is also, I have to say, funny. Mm-hmm. So even if you're just reading it by yourself, I think you'll get some of the, especially, I think parts of The Fountainhead are funny.
Absolutely.
There's humor in there if you understand the perspective.
Oh yeah. These characters these clients that he meets, I think they are hilarious. Some of them.
Yes.
The scene with the dean
almost
is also
like real life.
Fun. Yeah.
Yes. And so 9th of January 16 has 3 acts. So I think you could read it in about 2 or 2.5 hours. It's not like reading a novel. But again, you've got to picture it in your mind. And the great thing about play reading, if I'm going to say something positive about play reading, is you can cast it. If you're like, oh, I'd like to see Tom Cruise in the lead. Well, in your imagination, you can have whoever you want.
Maybe through a deep fake, you can actually do it with Tom Cruise. That could be an idea. I think
there might be some laws that you'd be breaking there, but in your imagination, you could do, anything you want.
Yeah. So it's an unknown work by Rand.
Yes.
There are others you said. Yeah.
I wanted to bring up a play called Think Twice. So it's a murder mystery. And it's 3 acts. And at the end of each act, they say, think twice. Meaning you think you know the murderer.
Yeah.
And she actually writes, I think Peikoff has it in the early Ayn Rand. That book. That's where Think Twice is. And at the end, when they kind of reveal the surprise ending, who the murderer really is, Ayn Rand says, well, if you know my philosophy, you should have been able to guess who the murderer was from the beginning. But it's very cleverly done. Jeff Britting, who's one of the archivists at the Ayn Rand Institute, he and I worked on an adaptation of Anthem, which we did about 10 years ago in New York City. There's also a play based on We the Living called The Unconquered, which has a book by Robert Mayhew that has Ayn Rand wrote 11 versions of The Unconquered. 11. Mm-hmm. So he's got all different play versions because, it's not an easy book to adapt. But have you ever seen the movie of the We the Living?
Of course, yeah, of course. We did a screening of it. They did the Ocon at DC last year. They did a screening.
Yes.
So yeah, we saw that,
and it's wonderful.
It is beautiful.
Alida Valli, and I think it's on YouTube.
Yeah, it is on YouTube. I think it is on YouTube. Yeah. Did they do
an Italian movie?
Yeah. Did you do The Fountainhead as a play?
We did scenes actually with Mark Pellegrino on a round table, an Ayn Rand round table, and we did the first half of The Fountainhead at an Ayn Rand con. The Ayn Rand conference.
Which one?
And that was great fun. The one in DC.
DC, I see. So, do you think it's adaptable to do the full Fountainhead on a play?
I think it was great for me to try. So I think it's possible. I would love to see it as a movie because I think you really want to see those buildings. Yeah. You want to see those buildings erected. And, even when Ayn Rand did the movie and wanted Frank Lloyd Wright, those everybody says those in the Gary Cooper movie, those buildings are lame.
Yeah.
They're not what she would want them to be. I wanted to bring up, do you know the Red Pawn?
The Red Pawn? No, I'm not familiar.
So PAWN, like the little piece of chess.
Yeah.
In the Ayn Rand, the early Ayn Rand, where they have fragments of things she wrote, there's a screenplay with a whole adaptation of a movie she was proposing called Red Pawn. It's fabulous. And I'm trying to work on that. Shoshana Milgram Knapp has been helping me. And I'd like to try to do that maybe for an Ayn Rand roundtable. We might do it even in the spring. But check it out.
Great.
It's great to read new Ayn Rand.
Yes, I did not know there's so much.
I read everything more than once. But
Yeah.
in the fiction world, there is more.
That's super cool, and I'm sure
Red Pawn.
it's a new thing for our viewers as well to hear about. So I'm very glad that you brought that up. What about some continental plays from the German-speaking world, for example? Because I'm studying German Romanticism. That's where I'm currently focused. So I'm wondering about that time.
Well, Schiller, of course, is fantastic. We did a British adaptation of Schiller's Mary Stuart. Excellent.
What is it about?
It worked. People loved it. It's the Queen Elizabeth, like Shakespeare time Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, the first.
And Mary Stuart was her rival. And Queen Elizabeth had Mary Stuart imprisoned. And they were, of course, related. And it was their struggle between each other. It's Schiller, and it is fantastic. So I highly, highly
Is it
recommend.
malevolent, or it has more of a benevolent approach?
That's a good question. I think there are aspects of both. Because Mary Stuart herself is going to be a tragic ending for her, because historically it was.
Yeah.
But the moments in which she thinks she's going to be freed are, dare I say it, sublime. So I'll send you a photograph from our Mary Stuart play where the actor, we have petals falling on her and she's spinning in a big gown. And that was a moment that she thought she was free. And that was a moment that really was sublime. But what romantic plays are you reading?
I'm not reading any. I'm looking for recommendations for you, so something to read.
Well, I don't know if she wants me to say, but there is an adaptation of Hernani, Hernani, that has a recent translation. We'll see if it comes out, but it is from an objectivist. And I'd love to see more objectivists, write and adapt.
So that's so great to see that there's so much happening in the world of theater. I wish it was the same in painting, for example, among objectivists. Very few people that I meet who talk about it, who write about it. At least we have you in the world of theater. That's great. And, maybe.
I like on Instagram. Do you ever see Linda Mann, Mann?
Linda Mann. No.
She has videos of her painting. Now, she does paint still life, and I know you're not necessarily a fan of still life.
I like still life.
Check it out. Linda Mann, Mann.
Okay.
And I think it might be Linda Mann Studio or something like that. And the great thing is, it's not like you just see the painting. You see how she makes it work. And I think that's really exciting to see a painter working.
Yeah, absolutely. Still life. I've seen so much beautiful still life now in Vienna. So gorgeous. You can eat these fruits. They're so fresh.
I love Vienna. And are you going to is it going to be a conference in Amsterdam?
Yes, we will have Ayn Rand Con in March in Amsterdam. Yes, it will be amazing.
I know you're not a big Vermeer fan, but there will be some Vermeer, I'm sure.
Vermeer is kind of. It's beautiful, right? I can appreciate all the technical aspects of it, but I want something to be more, to pack a punch.
Not so homey, not so everyday. There are some, I don't know if you're going to like these, there are a few Vermeers that are big, you think of Vermeer as small, big, that are religious. So there's one I remember seeing of, I think it's Mary with her foot on the globe, and maybe there's a snake or something. But check those out and see how you like them. They're just a little bit more, now the light isn't as gorgeous. The light in these little rooms is just, I think, sublime, but it's tiny. The small rooms, small windows. But see how you like, look for Vermeer and his religious, it was early in his career.
I will check that out, for sure.
Check that out. I did want to bring up...
Yeah, please. I wanted to ask you about Dostoevsky and plays of his.
There are plays based on him, but I don't think he wrote plays.
No, but I mean like a Crime and Punishment play.
So there's a novel, Crime and Punishment.
Yeah.
I think the plays are all adaptations.
Yeah.
So the Inquisitor and all that is great. Do you know that there's a Grand Inquisitor scene in St. Joan?
No.
There's a play by George Bernard Shaw. I was going to bring up the 8 great plays by Leonard Peikoff.
Of course.
I think all of them are worth reading, and one of them is St. Joan.
Okay.
So check that out, even if it's a long play. But check out, even if you just look up the Inquisitor, the Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah, from Brothers Karamazov.
It's like, well, it's not, because it's St. Joan, but it's like that. So if you like that scale.
Okay.
And it is, because it's George Bernard Shaw, it does have some comedy in it, especially the end has some comedy in it, I have to admit. So you can see what you think. I think the movies of St. Joan are okay. There are actual movies of Shaw's St. Joan that are black and white. And I know black and white isn't, great for everybody, but they're worth seeing.
Oh, there's some really great black and white films. And maybe a bit about adaptations, because it's interesting. I can think of many books that I would like to see adapted to either film or play. Do you think what do you think is the thing that allows a book to be adapted to a play or a movie?
I think a movie is easier to adapt a novel because the scale of a novel is so big. Right. But usually you have to get rid of the subplots. A novel has many threads, right? But if you're doing a movie of a novel, you want to scale it down to what's the main story, what's the main conflict. But you can get a lot of atmosphere in a film that a novel will have a lot of atmosphere, a lot of writing about the scenic aspect of it. And you really get that in a film.
So you don't do many adaptations?
Not many. I do a lot of, classic plays that were made. We've done, Othello, which is Shakespeare, Macbeth, which is a great Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet more than once. We hope to do it again next year. We've done scenes from Mona Vanna, which is a very obscure Maeterlinck play. And we did that in Austin when Ocon was in Austin. We've done Cyrano de Bergerac, which is a wonderful play. And that's a good film. That black and white film. I'm not as in love with the French more recent, Gérard Depardieu. I think his voice is too rough. But José Ferrer in the black and white film. Have you ever seen that?
No.
Cyrano. So check it out. Check it out.
I want to read the book.
The play.
First.
Okay. Read the play.
Yeah.
And it's very close to the play. Now, some of the romantic characters are a little silly. The way the girl looks, the way the lover looks. But José Ferrer is fabulous. The Cyrano is worth the whole thing. And I think the guy who plays De Guiche, who's the villain, he's also good, worth seeing.
So maybe one of the last things I want to... I inspired by the topic of our show, I went ahead and I bought a course on Shakespeare, a full 13 meetings, in-person meetings in Israel, in Tel Aviv, about Shakespeare, and they're going to cover 13 of his plays.
Wow.
So I thought I should have that. In Israeli schools they don't read much Shakespeare. I assume
see.
people who are from America they have more of, or from England, of course, they are more familiar. So maybe you have
English, of course, I'm very familiar. Americans often read plays and don't get the experience of hearing them or speaking them. So one of the things we do is go into the schools and work with the students, get them on their feet, have them speak the words of Romeo and Juliet, meet professional actors, have them hear the words. Because if you're just reading it as a kid, I mean, sophomore year, you usually read Julius Caesar, and American sophomores, they don't even know who Julius Caesar is. So I don't know how good a job America is doing of Shakespeare. But I'll be very interested. Do you know some of the plays you'll be reading of your 13?
Let me look the list up. So it's interesting because the guy who's doing this course actually did a whole series on Ayn Rand. He's not an objectivist, but he's a university professor at the University of Tel Aviv, of philosophy, and he's one of the few people who are actually interested in Rand, which is interesting. So he has Richard III, King Lear.
And Richard III has some good movie versions too. Go ahead.
Oh, it does.
What's it?
Cornelius.
It's not Cornelius. It's
Coriolanus.
Coriolanus. Yeah, that's from a historical figure in Rome. Yeah. That'll be challenging. But, there's a good film of Coriolanus because it has a lot of fighting.
Oh, it has fighting. What else do we have? It also says he's doing other English ones, so it might not all be Shakespeare. So the 12th Night?
12th Night is a comedy of Shakespeare. Okay. And it's the one with mistaken identity.
Oh.
Where there are twins, and the girl dresses up as a boy, and they think it's the other guy. It's fun. And there are good 12th Night movies, so that's good too. Keep going.
There's the Merchant from Venice.
The Merchant of Venice, that's the one with Shylock. Oh. And Yaron has good opinions on that because Shylock is a usurer. You know what that is?
Yeah.
Michael lends money. And Shylock is a Jew, and Yaron came to Austin and gave a talk at the Jewish Community Center. And we did scenes from Merchant of Venice. And there was a big debate because Yaron's point is the hatred of Jews was the hatred of capitalism.
Yeah.
And of course, in the room, there were a lot of liberals that didn't want to hear about capitalism. But go ahead, tell me more of your 13.
There is another one, but it's in Hebrew, so I don't know the English name. It's something about Falstaff.
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 Falstaff is a comedy, and it's about kind of a fat, drunken knight who was in another play, but a history play. But Queen Elizabeth liked him so much that she said to Shakespeare, "You got to write another play with this character in it." So he wrote this play, Falstaff.
Interesting. So it was commissioned by Queen Elizabeth.
Right.
Yeah, that's all the names it's shown here, so it doesn't have the full list.
So it's really the Merry Wives of Windsor is the American English version of Falstaff. There's no Shakespeare play called Falstaff. He's a character in Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, and then he's a big character in the Merry Wives of Windsor. So I can't wait.
Yeah. So what do you suggest to do for preparation? What should I?
I think you should get the script and put the movie on simultaneously. So I wouldn't just sit and read the script because I think it's like reading the Bible.
Yeah.
Thou hast. The language is so ancient. Yeah. Unless, I don't know, in the Israeli translations, do you think they might have updated the language?
I have no idea. So I will have to check that out.
So check it out. Check it out. Yeah, and you can look at the English too.
I'm excited
I'll be very interested. You should get somebody else to do it with you because it'd be more fun.
Well, the thing is, it's on mornings, and because I work U.S. time, nobody was available. But I said, it'll be nice to have something to do in the morning.
So will you be with other people on Zoom or something?
It'll be in person, so it'll be probably a bunch of retired old people.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great. You could hand out some Ayn Rand literature. That'll make it crazy.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
All right, my friend. Well, I have to go to work, but
all right,
anything more that you want to say before we end?
We end these shows with a final call to action. So, Anne,
Yes.
what is your call to action to our viewers? What do you need to go and do?
You need to go to the theater. Go to the theater. There's theater all around you. You just have to look it up. But find one that appeals to you. I went to school in New York City. And I went, of course, to many plays at many theaters. But I would find the theater that did the kind of plays that I liked. And then I would keep going to that theater. So at that point, it was called the Roundabout Theater. So they did a lot of classics, a lot of Ibsen. And I would go to every production they did, and I would learn more and more. So you'll have to let me know what. So the call to action is get out of the house. My friend did go to a Broadway show the other day in her mask because she was afraid of COVID. But I'm like, whatever. Just go to the theater. Go to the theater.
Just go to the theater. Thank you. That's a great message, and I think it was a beautiful conversation. I learned a lot, so that's the most important thing. If I don't care, honestly, I learned something.